My mom kicked me out for my golden child brother. Years later, she needed me. Hi, welcome back to my channel. Please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon for upcoming more interesting videos.
My name is Emily Carter. I am 27 years old and I live in Portland, Oregon. And for most of my life, I believed that if I just tried harder, maybe my mom would finally see me the way she saw my younger brother, Jason. Growing up in our small two-bedroom house on the edge of town, everything seemed to revolve around him. Jason was 2 years younger than me, but you would think he was the center of the universe, the way my mom treated him. When he got a C on a test, she would hug him and say school was too hard anyway. But when I came home with straight A's, she would barely look up from the kitchen counter before asking why I did not help clean the garage or finish some other chore. I remember birthdays the most. Jason always had huge celebrations with decorations, balloons, and a pile of gifts from expensive video games to brand new bikes. My birthdays were usually quiet, just a small cake from the grocery store and a quick happy birthday before the day moved on like it was nothing. I tried not to let it hurt, but when you're a kid, it is impossible not to notice the difference. As I got older, I started taking on more responsibilities. I worked part-time at a small grocery store after school, helped with bills when I could, and kept my grades high because I thought maybe that would finally make my mom proud. But every time Jason got into trouble, she would somehow find a way to blame someone else, usually me. If he skipped school, it was because I did not give a good example. If he got into a fight, it was because someone provoked him, and I should have been there to stop it. I remember one afternoon when Jason came home with a suspension notice from school because he had gotten caught cheating on a big exam. Instead of being angry, my mom sat him down at the kitchen table and told him teachers sometimes pick on kids who are smarter than everyone else. Meanwhile, she looked at me and asked why I could not help him study more. The frustration built up slowly over the years, like water behind a dam. And by the time I turned 18, I felt like I was walking on thin ice inside my own home. The night everything finally broke started like any other evening. I had just finished a long shift at the grocery store and came home exhausted. The house was quiet, and Jason was nowhere to be seen. My mom asked me where he was like I was supposed to know, and I told her honestly that I had no idea. She looked annoyed, but did not say much. A few hours later, the phone rang, and everything changed. It was a police officer telling my mom that Jason had crashed her car after sneaking out with some friends. Luckily, no one was seriously hurt, but the car was badly damaged. I could hear my mom gasping on the phone as she paced across the living room. When she hung up, she looked straight at me with this mix of anger and disappointment and asked why I let Jason take the car. I stared at her completely confused because I had been at work all evening, but she kept insisting that as the older sister, I should have been watching him. The argument that followed felt like years of pain finally exploding. I told her it was not my responsibility to control Jason and that he never listened to me anyway. She said I was jealous of him and always trying to make him look bad. I said she never once held him accountable for anything. The words kept getting louder and sharper until the air in the room felt heavy with anger. Jason came home a little later, shaken but mostly quiet, and my mom immediately rushed to comfort him, asking if he was hurt and telling him everything would be okay. When I tried to point out that he could have seriously hurt someone, she turned on me like I was the problem again. That was the moment something inside me snapped. She shouted that if I hated the family so much, maybe I should not live there at all. At first, I thought she was just angry, but then she told me to go pack my things and leave. Her voice was cold in a way I had never heard before. I stood there frozen for a moment, waiting for her to calm down or take the words back, but she never did. So I walked into my small bedroom, grabbed the only suitcase I owned, and started stuffing clothes inside. My hands were shaking and my chest felt tight, but I refused to cry in front of them. When I walked out the front door that night, the air was cool and quiet, and the streetlights cast long shadows across the sidewalk. I remember standing there with my suitcase, wondering where I was supposed to go next. Part of me hoped my mom would open the door and tell me to come back inside, but the door stayed closed and the house behind me went dark. That was the moment I realized I was completely on my own, and as I started walking down the empty street, I promised myself that one day I would build a life so strong that no one could ever make me feel that small again, though at the time I had no idea how long it would take before my past came back to find me again. The first few months after I left home were the hardest time of my life. I was 18 years old with one suitcase, very little money, and absolutely no idea what the future was going to look like. The night my mom kicked me out, I ended up calling my friend Megan, who lived across town, and when she answered the phone and heard my voice shaking, she did not ask many questions. She simply told me to come over. I still remember walking up to her apartment building just before midnight, feeling exhausted, scared, and embarrassed. Megan let me stay on her couch for a few weeks, and even though she tried to make it feel normal, I could not ignore the feeling that I was a burden. During the day, I kept working my shifts at the grocery store, and at night, I started searching for any opportunity that could help me move forward. I signed up for classes at the local community college because I knew that if I wanted a better future, I needed an education, even if it meant balancing school and work at the same time. My schedule became exhausting. I would wake up early, attend classes, spend the afternoon studying in the quiet corner of the campus library, and then work evening shifts at the grocery store until late at night. Sometimes I came back to make an apartment so tired that I fell asleep fully dressed on the couch. But despite how difficult those days were, something inside me slowly began to change. For the first time in my life, I was making decisions for myself without worrying about someone constantly criticizing me. Every small step forward felt like proof that I could survive on my own. Eventually, I saved enough money to rent a tiny room in a shared house with two other college. The room was barely big enough for a bed and a small desk, but to me, it felt like freedom. I decorated the walls with cheap posters and placed a small plant near the window, just to make the space feel like my own. Over the next few years, I kept pushing forward. I finished my classes at community college and transferred into a small university program focused on marketing. It was not easy balancing tuition payments, rent, and daily expenses, but I learned how to budget every dollar and take on extra shifts whenever I needed them. There were moments when I felt overwhelmed, especially during finals week, when my mind felt stretched in every direction. But I reminded myself that giving up would mean returning to the same life I had fought so hard to escape. During that time, I occasionally heard small updates about my family through distant relatives or social media posts that appeared unexpectedly. Jason seemed to be living a completely different life from mine. After high school, he enrolled in college but dropped out after a year, claiming the program was boring. A few months later, he started talking about business ideas online, posting pictures with flashy cars and expensive restaurants that made it look like he was successful. But the stories I heard from relatives painted a different picture. They said he was constantly asking people for money, jumping from one plan to another, and depending heavily on our mom to support him. Meanwhile, I stayed silent and kept my distance. I avoided visiting my hometown and rarely spoke about my family because every memory still carried a sharp edge of pain. As time passed, my life slowly stabilized. I graduated from university, found a steady marketing job at a small local company, and moved into my own modest apartment in Portland. The place was nothing fancy, just a quiet one-bedroom unit with light gray walls and a narrow balcony, but it represented something important. It was proof that I had built a life entirely on my own. There were evenings when I sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching the city lights and thinking about how far I had come since that night with the suitcase. Even though I felt proud, there was still a small part of me that wondered if my mom ever thought about what happened, or if she ever regretted telling me to leave. Nearly 10 years passed without a single message or phone call from her. I learned to accept the silence as part of my life and focused on building friendships, growing in my career, and finding peace in the independence I had created. Then, one quiet afternoon, everything changed. I was sitting at my desk at work reviewing a campaign report when my phone buzzed softly on the table. At first, I ignored it, thinking it was another routine notification, but the screen lit up again with a new message. When I finally picked it up and glanced at the sender, my heart immediately started racing because the name on the screen was one I had not seen in almost a decade. It was my mom. For a moment, I just stared at the phone, feeling a strange mix of confusion, anger, and curiosity. My hands felt slightly shaky as I opened the message, expecting something long or emotional, but instead it was just a short line. "Emily, I need your help." I read the words again slowly, trying to understand what they meant. After so many years of silence, those 6 simple words felt heavier than anything I had ever heard from her before. And as another message notification appeared right beneath the first one, I realized that whatever was happening back home was about to pull me back into a past I thought I had already left behind. For 2 days after receiving my mom's message, I kept staring at my phone, wondering whether I should respond or simply ignore it and continue living the life I had built without her. A part of me felt angry remembering the night she told me to leave, while another part of me felt a quiet curiosity about why she suddenly needed my help after nearly 10 years of silence. Eventually, the curiosity won, and I sent a short reply asking what she wanted. Her answer came quickly, asking if we could meet in person the following weekend at a small cafe near my hometown. The idea of seeing her again after so many years made my stomach twist with nerves. But I agreed because I felt like I needed closure, or at least some kind of explanation. The drive back to my hometown that Saturday morning felt strange and surreal. The streets looked familiar but distant, like scenes from an old memory that did not fully belong to me anymore. When I arrived at the cafe, I sat in the corner near the window, watching people walk by outside, while my mind replayed fragments of childhood memories and the long years that followed. A few minutes later, the door opened, and I saw my mom walk inside. At first, I almost did not recognize her. She looked older than I remembered, with faint lines around her eyes and a tired posture that made her seem smaller than before. When she spotted me, her steps slowed, and for a moment we simply stared at each other across the room before she finally walked over and sat down. The silence between us felt heavy and awkward until she quietly said my name, Emily. Hearing her voice again after so many years stirred up emotions I had tried to bury, but I kept my expression calm and asked why she wanted to meet. She took a deep breath and began explaining that things had been difficult recently and that Jason had gotten himself into serious trouble. According to her story, Jason had been trying to start different businesses over the past several years, but none of them had succeeded. He had borrowed money from friends and lenders, promising big returns that never happened, and each failed plan left him deeper in debt. She said he always believed the next idea would fix everything, so he kept taking bigger risks until the situation spiraled out of control. I listened quietly, trying to process the information while she continued talking. Her voice trembled slightly as she admitted that Jason had started using her name to secure loans and credit agreements, convincing her that it was only temporary and that he would repay everything quickly. Now, creditors were calling her house every day, demanding payments that she could not afford, and she was afraid she might lose the home she had lived in for decades. Hearing all of this felt strange because part of me was shocked by how serious the situation sounded, while another part of me could not help noticing that she still spoke about Jason with the same protective tone she had always used. It was as if she wanted to blame circumstances rather than his choices. I asked her why she had not contacted me earlier if things were this bad, and she hesitated before admitting that Jason had often told her I would never help anyway. He had apparently been telling her for years that I hated the family and refused to speak to them because I believed I was better than everyone else. Listening to that explanation felt like another wave of betrayal because it meant my brother had been shaping her view of me all this time. I told her I had never said those things, and that the only reason I stayed away was because I was the one who had been pushed out of the family in the first place. For a moment, she looked confused. We sat there in silence for a while as the noise of the cafe filled the space around us. Finally, she lowered her eyes and admitted that maybe she had not questioned Jason's stories enough over the years, and that she was beginning to realize things might not be as simple as she thought. I could see a mixture of regret and worry on her face, but I still did not know what she expected from me. After everything she explained, I asked her directly what kind of help she was actually asking for. She hesitated again, twisting her hands together on the table, before speaking in a quiet voice that sounded almost fragile. Then she looked up at me with tired eyes and said that the debts Jason created had grown so large that she had no way to handle them alone, and that she was afraid the bank would soon take her house away. The way she said those words made it clear that she believed I might be the only person who could fix the situation. And in that moment, I realized that the reason she had reached out after all these years was not just to talk or apologize, but to ask me for something I never imagined she would request from me after everything that happened between us. When my mom finally explained what she wanted from me, the words felt heavy in the air between us. She said the debts Jason created had become so large that the bank was threatening to take the house if payments were not made soon. Then she looked at me carefully, almost hopefully, and asked if I could help pay some of it back. For a moment, I honestly thought I had misunderstood her, because after everything she had just told me, the idea that she expected me to solve the problem felt unreal. I sat there, staring at the table, trying to organize my thoughts, while a flood of memories rushed through my mind. Memories of the night she told me to leave the house, memories of being blamed for Jason mistakes, and memories of the long years when neither of them contacted me at all. I took a slow breath and asked her if she really believed it was fair to ask me for that kind of help after what happened between us. She looked uncomfortable and said she knew the situation was complicated, but she did not know where else to turn. Hearing that response stirred something inside me that I had been holding back for years, and suddenly, all the words I never said before began rising to the surface. I told her how that night when she kicked me out changed everything for me. I explained how I spent months sleeping on a friend's couch, working long hours just to survive, and how I built my entire life without any support from my own family. My voice shook slightly as I reminded her that for almost 10 years, she never once called to ask if I was okay, or even if I had a place to live. She listened quietly while I spoke, and for the first time, I noticed her expression slowly changing from defensive to regretful. After a long silence, she admitted that maybe she had been too quick to believe Jason's version of events all those years ago, and that she now realized she might have treated me unfairly. The admission was small and hesitant, but it was the closest thing to an apology I had ever heard from her. Still, even with that moment of honesty, the request she made felt impossible for me to accept. I told her that paying off Jason's debts would not actually solve the real problem because he would simply continue making reckless decisions if someone else kept rescuing him. She looked conflicted, as if she wanted to agree but could not fully bring herself to admit it. Before our conversation could go any further, the cafe doors suddenly opened, and I saw a familiar figure walk inside. It was Jason. He looked older than the last time I saw him, but the confident, careless expression on his face had not changed. When he noticed us sitting together, he walked over quickly and dropped into the chair beside our mom like he had every right to be there, without even greeting me properly. The atmosphere at the table instantly grew tense. He asked what we were talking about, and when my mom explained that she had asked for my help, his expression hardened. He said that since I was doing well in life now, it only made sense for me to step up and fix the situation he created. Hearing him speak so casually about a problem that could cost our mom her home made my frustration boil over. I told him directly that I was not responsible for the choices he made, and that expecting me to clean up his mess was unfair. Instead of showing any regret, he became defensive and started accusing me of abandoning the family years ago and acting like I was better than everyone else. The argument grew louder until people at nearby tables began glancing in our direction. My mom tried to calm things down, but it was clear that Jason still believed he deserved to be saved from the consequences of his actions. As I watched him sitting there, expecting everything to be solved for him, I suddenly realized that nothing had truly changed since we were kids. He was still the golden child who believed someone else would always protect him. And in that moment, I understood that if I agreed to help the way they wanted, I would only continue the same unhealthy pattern that had shaped our family for years. So, instead of giving the answer they expected, I took a deep breath, looked directly at both of them, and made a decision that would change the direction of the entire situation from that moment forward. So now I want to ask you something. If you were in my place, would you have helped your brother after everything he did, or would you have walked away and let him face the consequences of his own choices? And what about my mom? Do you think she truly realized her mistake, or was she only reaching out because she had no other option left? Sometimes life puts you in situations where the people who once hurt you suddenly need you the most. The real question is, what would you do when that moment comes? Would you forgive, or would you protect your peace? Let me know what you think, because I'm really curious to hear your opinion.